and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again! It is very rare to see a company-wide crossover event outside of the big two of Marvel and DC. The reason is pretty simple. Most companies do not have a shared universe. Dark Horse didn't have a big crossover between Star Wars, Buffy, and Aliens, for instance, back in the day. Image in the 90s tried an event or two when their own universe was relatively young, but of course Image as a shared universe didn't really catch on as the books each started going in their own very separate directions. A few other imprints in the 90s did have their own as well, notably Valiant with their first crossover, Unity. More recently, as indie companies have had more of a chance to establish themselves and get more attention away from the big two, we've had some more crossovers. Valiant has done Incursion, for instance. IDW did a pseudo-crossover a few years ago with Infestation, where a zombie plague infects multiple different universes from the same source, though none of them interacting with each other. And at the time of this video's release, the lesser-known company Lionforge Comics is actually doing a critically acclaimed event called 7 Days for its Catalyst Prime universe. It's getting good reviews, and maybe someday I'll actually check it out, but for now, my knowledge of such things only exists in DC and Marvel. But then we've got our review today. With the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Hasbro started dangling their feet in the idea of creating a shared universe with the toy properties they owned, like Transformers and G.I. Joe. Surprisingly, My Little Pony is not involved in that. And don't you dare tell me it wouldn't work! I can totally see Pinkie Pie battling monsters alongside Optimus Prime. But definitely relevant to this show's interest is an acquisition Hasbro made a few years ago. The rights to ROM Space Knight! For those of you who are new around here, a few years ago I did the ROMtrospective, where I discussed the comic tie-in to ROM Space Knight, and how a simple toy promotion became an influential part of the Marvel Universe. ROM is amazing, and I highly recommend tracking down back issues. While a cinematic universe hasn't really emerged for their properties, the comics have picked up the slack there with their own comic book universe, Transformers acting as kind of the flagship of it all thanks to its own popularity. Aside from G.I. Joe, this also includes ROM, Micronauts, Action Man, and M.A.S.K. Apparently, at least according to Wikipedia, Jem and the Holograms and friggin' Clue are also part of the universe, though didn't participate in the crossovers they've done. Well, clearly, Colonel Mustard was the Herald of Unicron. Pretty obvious in hindsight. As I've mentioned in a previous video or two, ROM relaunched its own comic book in 2016, lasting only about 14 issues and an annual. It was decent, followed the same basic premise of ROM on Earth hunting for the Dire Wraiths, though for legal reasons, since Marvel owns the rights to some parts of the ROM mythos, like his original homeworld and the Space Knights they devised, the book created its own original Space Knights, a new homeworld, and a different look for the Dire Wraiths, ROM's shape-shifting enemies. They also brought in what was only mentioned in the toy commercials, the Sol Star Order, that was the larger organization the Space Knights were a part of. The best part about the book is, despite now being set in modern times with more realistic dialogue for the human characters, ROM himself pretty much remained the same as his Marvel version. His speech patterns were virtually identical and true to the character. But now let's get to the comic itself. Admittedly, there's probably going to be bits and pieces that I'm going to get wrong, since my knowledge of stuff like Transformers and G.I. Joe is based mostly on pop culture osmosis and not from the books that led up to this. I've done some research into what happened in preparation for this, but I apologize for anything I get wrong in advance. So let's dig into IDW's Revolution and see what happens when you try to put all this stuff together.
Say you want a revolution, well
reading from a trade, plus it's 5 issues, 6 if you count the 0th, so no looking at the covers. The 0th issue basically serves as a recap of events that led up to this point, so we'll just dive in, opening with a flashback to a group of M.A.S.K soldiers out in the desert. This used to be our world. Then we lost it in the divorce. The two speakers lament the good old days, forming teams and fighting the good fight, even meeting with Action Man. A third person, G.I. Joe member Scarlet, identifies one of the speakers as General Joe Colton, aka the guy whom G.I. Joe was named after. The other individual, Mannheim, remains in the shadows as he briefs them on their current situation. The Transformers on Earth. They discovered that a mineral in the Earth, identified as Ore-13, could be refined into energon, although when manipulated in other ways is incalculably powerful. However, while they recognize the threat of Megatron and the Decepticons, they don't view the Autobots as saviors or allies, since they feel Optimus Prime didn't treat them as equals. Prime vanished and the Decepticons in the ensuing conflict killed almost 1 billion people. While Prime did come back and stop Megatron, his assistance in helping rebuild civilization was limited, refusing access to Cybertronian technology before they eventually left the planet, and Cobra decided to emerge to try to take the world for themselves. It didn't help that they had such a catchy theme song. Nukes went off in Nanchao that exposed G.I. Joe's operations to the wider world, and made everyone distrust them. The Decepticons returned to Earth and made a deal with the Earth Defense Command, and with G.I. Joe gone, no one was around to mention what a terrible idea that was. Optimus Prime came back, again, supposedly to welcome Earth into the galactic community. But it was pretty much the Autobots annexing Earth. I am not here to rule you, but to help you on this path. I bring the people of Earth that which is the right of all sentient beings. I bring freedom. Turned out to be a big plot to spread cheap Cybertronian goods to an unsuspecting market and corner it. On top of that, there's a new Action Man working for the UK, while mysterious deaths are occurring in Northern California, which we of course see that it's Rom fighting the Dire Wraiths. Scarlet worries about other problems they may not even know about, and we get a shot of the Micronauts. The Micronauts were a toy line licensed from Takara's Microman series, which in turn, part of which was made into Transformers. The idea was they were tiny people pretending to be action figures while living in our world, but in the comics heralded from an entire microscopic universe. Like Rom, they were a licensed toy that became integrated into the Marvel Universe proper before, of course, everyone needing to forget they existed when the license wasn't renewed. Anyway, General Joe continues to talk about the Autobots' actions. His Autobots have brought food to famine-stricken deserts. He crushed the Decepticons who, well, deceived us. What? No! The Autobots have been working primarily in areas where there are large deposits of Ore-13. And something is wrong with the ore. It's becoming unstable, and in a matter of weeks, it's going to explode and take a good chunk of the planet with it. And because of the Autobots' activities, they think the Cybertronians are behind it, and they need help to stop Prime and his forces. And thus we reveal who it is they're talking to. Miles Mannheim, aka Miles Mayhem, former founder of M.A.S.K, and the villain of their franchise. And he's got the half-destroyed corpse of Blitzwing strung up behind him as it pleads to let it die. Hush, foul creature. We have a tyrant to overthrow. If you've been good, we'll kill you after dinner. And thus we enter issue 1, with Action Man, aka Ian Noble, arriving at Mount Olympus in Greece. He and his team are tracking a distress call from inside the mountain, where they locate a crap ton of Ore-13, and a dying G.I. Joe member, Big Ben, buried in the crystals. He explains that he was tracking some covert agents here, and in the ensuing firefight, his entire squad was killed, and the crystals are continuing to destabilize. What's worse, he found G.I. Joe dog tags among those they were pursuing. He tells Action Man to escape and warn the world about the crystals, which explode and blast off the top of Mount Olympus. What the bloody hell did you do this time? I can't claim it, Simmons, but I have an idea who can. The Mount Olympus Tourism Office. While the president officially hauls G.I. Joe out of mothballs to investigate the potential connection between the Transformers and the explosion at Mount Olympus, Optimus Prime wants some answers about the explosion himself, especially worried because Autobot City is sitting on top of a cache of Ore-13, and if they don't know what caused the explosion, he'd rather it not happen again under their feet. Thanks to events in the Transformers book, Soundwave is actually allied with the Autobots and working with Prime, which is great news for me because if you hadn't noticed from all the toys on the shelf, I'm kind of a fan of Soundwave. Don't ask me why. Cool voice, and there's something awesome about a dude who shoots out other dudes to do his bidding. It's like Pokemon, but with giant robots. Soundwave reports that he detected a weird fluctuation in energy output from the ore prior to the explosion, but even if they detected it in time under the city, they couldn't evacuate before it exploded. What's worse, the energy signature was Cybertronian, so it's likely the humans will blame them for this. He dispatches Cup and Aileron to investigate, since they're the closest to Mount Olympus. Meanwhile, in Oregon, G.I. Joe prepares to launch an attack on some Autobots that are helping in relief efforts after a storm. Real American heroes, getting ready to assault the ones trying to help people. G.I. Joe! Scarlet is confused why they'd be bothering to help people if they're also trying to blow up mountains, but General Joe tells her to focus on the mission and that the Cybertronians are not their friends. They commence the attack on Jazz and RC, who easily counterattack, but Prime and some others arrive to try to stop this before it gets worse. Unfortunately, the Joes don't listen and continue their assault. Fortunately, Soundwave is awesome and uses a specialized virus to hack and disable all the Joes' vehicles. Operation Incapacitation. Consider yourselves lucky, Earthlings. Weeks ago, I would not have thought it worth the effort to spare your lives. I know that may seem cold, but the dude transforms into a cassette player. You'd be pissed if you had to play the same 12 songs over and over. Optimus once again tries to get them to calm down, saying there's no reason for the Earth Defense Command to attack a mission of mercy, but the soldiers with functioning weapons make it clear they're not with the EDC and continue to attack. Of course, even with rocket launchers, it's like a mosquito taking on a jet. The fact that Optimus doesn't immediately step on one dude after getting hit in the face with a rocket shows the infinite patience of the guy. However, before they can once again try to de-escalate, things get complicated with the arrival of Rom. Optimus states that he's not with them, but it doesn't really do any good as Rom immediately targets General Joe and zaps him with the neutralizer. Oh, I should note, the whole pacifism and no killing thing that kept being brought up and questioned and sometimes broken by Rom from the Marvel series, yeah, that's not in this. Rom is just straight up melting dire wraiths. And indeed, Rom neutralizes a few more wraiths among their number. Naturally, Scarlet just thinks it's a Cybertronian weapon and orders the Joes to take him down. Still, they're confused when despite him taking heavy fire, he doesn't shoot back. Jazz even tries to grab him to stop him from shooting, but in the chaos, the humans are still firing on the Autobots too. As Rom flies off, Optimus orders pursuit, though Soundwave has the good sense to at least reactivate their communication equipment so the Joes can radio for help with their wounded. Scarlet swears vengeance on the Transformers, saying that the Joes will bring them down for this and ending issue 1. What I kind of love about this is it's operating under an old school superhero team-up idea. The heroes meet, there's a misunderstanding, and they fight, only to team up in the end to take down the real threat. It's just in this, it's like 6 different teams of people, and one of them will show up to shoot your friends because they're actually shape-shifting alien wizards. As we enter issue 2, the Joes remain confused about the tactics, in particular Rom's arrival and only killing a few of them and no civilians before just leaving again. Why would the Cybertronians decimate us, then turn our systems on and leave? I don't know the mind of an alien. Helix? Thoughts? Decimate means kill 1 in 10. That's only one definition of it. Another is to kill, destroy, or remove a large percentage or part of. Don't be a pedantic actually commenter, Helix. Meanwhile, Rom, having taken damage, lands in the Umpqua National Forest next to a black jaguar. Earth creature, I fear you are not safe on this shore. I bid you, run! Roar? Wait, what do you mean your species isn't native to Oregon? The Autobots arrive and Prime, aiming a gun as big as Rom's entire body, makes it clear that he should not try to escape. I want answers. Who are you?
And why did you kill the humans? Our relations are complicated enough without pinning a murder spree on my people.
I have killed no humans. Wait, humans are those black jaguar things, right? Rom explains about the dire wraiths as he tries to make his escape, the other Autobots arriving to tell him he shouldn't dream of doing anything else to Prime. You cannot imagine what my dreams are like! How can I show up to class in my underwear when I don't wear any? Optimus puts an end to this by ramming him in truck form. Back at G.I. Joe headquarters, Scarlet refuses to listen to reason about how nothing about what happened makes sense, instead finally deciding to work with Miles Mayhem as he tortures Blitzwing for information. The robot, is it in pain?
My dear, is your toaster in pain when you burn bread?
I mean, toasters can't normally talk, unless it's Red Dwarf. Also, a toaster is just trying to do its job when that happens. Blitzwing wasn't created to be tortured. Although you might think that, given how the original series treated him. Scarlet says that her morality went out the window when Joe Colton was killed and needs his help. The Earth Defense Command is gone, and their equipment is susceptible to the invasive programs Soundwave used to disable them. Fortunately, Mayhem has the M.A.S.K vehicles and personnel to help.
Use discretion while addressing the Mobile Armored Strike Command.
That's what M.A.S.K stands for?
A work in progress.
He just doesn't want to admit that at the time he thought command was spelled with a K. Mayhem introduces Scarlet to Matt Tracker, the leader of the M.A.S.K team, and explains how their equipment should be advanced enough to counter the Cybertronians. They figure they'll return to the scene of the crime in Greece and will intercept them there. And indeed, Cup and Aileron are examining Mount Olympus and the Ore-13 crystals. Cup says the radiation emitting from them is similar to a space bridge, a transportation method used in Transformers to transport objects across great distances. Although in this case, the bridge doesn't move from one planet to another, but instead a different universe.
Me and transdimensional travel got a long history, lass. I'll tell you about it sometime.
He's not kidding. That Infestation crossover I mentioned earlier, Cup fought interdimensional zombies in that. On their way back, through a city, because that seems like the smartest strategy when people are paranoid about them, M.A.S.K's forces intercept the two and attack. They disable and capture Cup, though Matt's forces recognize that the Transformers act like people and not machines, so they're more suspicious of the situation, allowing Aileron to get away so she can warn Prime about the space bridge. However, we soon see that a figure is watching these events unfold, learning that the ore is being pulled through the space bridge, and that figure? Baron Karza, the main villain of Micronauts. And indeed, we pick things up in issue 3 with the Micronauts themselves traveling through some kind of entropy cloud. Now, I should note that much like a Marvel or DC event, there were tie-in comics that expanded upon the story. And apparently a lot of the setup for the Micronauts stuff was in their tie-in issue. However, as with Event Comics Month, I am focusing only on the main miniseries. It should not be expected to have to read the tie-ins to understand the story. If it was that important, it should be happening in the main series. Tie-ins exist to expand the event, not make it harder to read. Fortunately, we get just enough here. Some kind of entropy cloud is destroying microspace. Great, a tiny version of Logopolis was holding them together too. With such a threat, the Micronauts are working with their sworn enemy, the aforementioned Baron Karza, to try to save it. They found a transformer at the heart of the entropy cloud, but Karza explains that time moves differently inside of the cloud, so he's had years to study it. The transformer is in fact Micronus Prime, the progenitor of all life within microspace. I've gotta say, I like this. While sometimes this kind of melding of franchises and stories can feel rather fanficky, since Micronauts' own origin lies in a toy line also related to Transformers, it feels rather appropriate. Anyway, Micronus is serving as a gateway to the main universe, and Ore-13 is actually capable of slowing and destroying the entropy cloud. However, the process of transporting it is also kind of making it explode in the main universe, which is kind of like distributing medical supplies with fireworks. At G.I. Joe headquarters, Tracker is pissed because they were not informed of the sentience of the Autobots, which seems kind of odd that he wouldn't know about that since, you know, the multiple times the Transformers talked publicly and all. He doesn't want to hurt or kill anyone or anything. He's a physicist, though Mayhem and Scarlet try to calm him by reminding him that they're at war with the survival of the planet at stake. Still, Scarlet seems to be a bit more receptive to questioning the direction they're going in, especially after learning that Mayhem deliberately sent them on the mission to capture one. Speaking of, Kup tries to talk to some of the M.A.S.K members, who in the original toy line were actually members of M.A.S.K's opponents, the organization Venom, and convince them of what's going on, but all he does is reveal that the Autobots are sitting on top of a huge load of Ore-13. And indeed, back at Autobot City, Rom is giving more details about the Dire Wraiths and how their magic is actually enhanced by Ore-13, making them able to hide from his energy analyzer. He's still able to see them with his own eyes, though.
And destroy them, as you did the Earth forces. I killed no humans, but you did kill without mercy. Soundwave, we face a more pressing danger. More pressing than the preservation of life.
How weird is it that in a conversation with friggin' Rom, it's the Decepticon arguing for the preservation of life? Optimus and Rom think it's the Dire Wraiths who are causing the ore to explode, but Windblade reports that in another tie-in book, they discovered the link between Autobot City, aka the Titan Transformer Metroplex, and Microspace, including the body of Micronauts Prime. She wants them to devote their efforts to aiding him, but Optimus thinks they need to devote their resources to protecting Earth because of its immediate danger. Aileron arrives to report on what they found out about the Ore-13 being transported to the Microverse, but Prime remains steadfast that Earth is their priority.
Another universe? Perhaps in that other universe, I fought a mummy alongside someone who knew Kung Fu.
Oh, that just seems silly. Back at G.I. Joe headquarters, Scarlet is informed that after examining the remains of those killed by Rom, they were not human. Combined with Mayhem's own secretive agenda, Scarlet knows something is up, and the entire military command structure could be compromised. So she puts in a call to someone for help.
Who do you want me to kill?
You know, this is how texting has made us lose phone etiquette. It's not hello anymore, it's who do you want me to kill? Karza is contacted by an ally on Earth who tells him to slow down his transfer of Ore-13 because of how it's causing it to, explode and threaten the Earth. But he balks at that and decides to accelerate the process to stop the entropy cloud. Micronauts Prime's chest opens up, revealing a Stargate that serves as the actual physical link of the space bridge. There's another in Autobot City that Rom is in the process of examining. Karza initiates the space bridge so as to allow the Micronauts to travel through for some reason, but then Ore-13 starts arriving into their universe and exploding. I guess not in a way that actually stops the entropy, but risks Micronauts Prime's destruction. Karza thinks his ally is betraying him, and the Micronauts head through to try to stop what's causing it. And we soon see that it's Rom. Somehow his armor is resonating with both the crystals and the space bridge, giving him control over both. He's elected to end the threat of Ore-13 and the Wraiths himself by shunting it all through at once and destroying it. Windblade objects to that, as does Prime.
What madness is this?
A new spore of one, Prime. After some back and forth, they convince Rom that sacrificing the lives of those in the Microverse to save their own would make them as bad as the Wraiths, and he stops.
But we are not alone, Rom. Not any longer. Windblade, Soundwave, myself, we stand in alliance. The Wraiths must be stopped. Earth must be saved, but Microspace shall not die on this day. Maybe tomorrow, when the weather's better.
Unfortunately, the Micronauts don't hear Optimus's little speech, not that it'll do any good anyway, since we soon learn that they don't understand any languages around them, and fly through the space bridge, a tiny little spaceship moving through Autobot City. They're amazed by everything, wondering where they are, until they come across someone unexpected in the halls, thinking that it's some kind of giant Karza robot, and this was all a trap. Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe. Oh great, he defected to the Autobots just like Soundwave? Actually, he was the one Scarlet contacted, and we see him infiltrate the city at the beginning of issue 4. He fights the Micronauts, but the arrival of RC complicates matters. Fortunately, any more fighting is put on hold with a sonic blast from Soundwave. I love how at every turn, Soundwave proves to be the best and coolest character in this whole thing. The Micronauts are, of course, tiny even by Transformer standards, and Rom is the closest thing they have in size to them. Back at G.I. Joe headquarters, Mayhem is talking with someone named Caleb about their own agenda and how things have been screwed up a bit thanks to tie-in issues. Matt comes in, suspicious of what's going on, but it doesn't matter since they're dispatching their forces to Autobot City. And we soon see who Caleb was. A dire wraith. He and the other wraiths are meeting to discuss the ultimate fruition of their magics and technology, a being called Axiom that starts absorbing their own cache of Or-13 and imbuing its power into the wraiths. Back with the Autobots, Rom tries to apologize to the Micronauts about his actions concerning the Or, but they have no idea what the hell he's saying. Although I don't know how useful an apology really is. As dramatic as Rom can be, it's hard to really spin, "Sorry, I nearly annihilated your entire universe. My bad." Snake Eyes tries to play possum and pretend he's unconscious, but both RC and Prime know that's not the case. Prime asks him to put them in touch with his leaders so they can discuss their real threat, and Snake Eyes reveals that he activated a distress call when he was caught.
Good. Then aid will be here shortly.
To fire at us. Wait. At G.I. Joe headquarters, Scarlet and Roadblock return from a tie-in issue to learn that said headquarters got attacked by the Action Man tie-in issue, wherein the British agent rescued Cup. They learn also of Mayhem leaving with all the M.A.S.K personnel, whom we then see arriving at Autobots City. And M.A.S.K is backed up by the Dire Wraiths, which aid in their attack. It's just chaos as Mayhem reveals his own ambitions to Matt's shock.
Yes, Prime, you sought to lord over the Earth, but that job, I'm afraid, is mine, and I'm getting a 50-cent pay raise for it, too!
However, the Dire Wraiths immediately turn on Mayhem, seeing this as their chance to wipe out all opposition. As Matt berates Mayhem for both his betrayal and his idiocy, Mayhem just rants about how he's the only one who has the cunning to protect Earth, and does so by opening the space bridge and letting through Baron Karza. He was working with him the whole time. Mayhem betrays G.I. Joe, Rom betrays his principals, the Dire Wraiths betray Mayhem, Mayhem betrayed everybody by working with Karza, Karza is gonna betray Mayhem. I feel like Tommy Wiseau is gonna walk in at any moment and yell, "Everybody betray me!" Despite an impressive entrance, Karza is only a few inches tall, so the Dire Wraiths are unimpressed. However, he's not a tiny space despot for nothing, using something called Interchange to merge with Caleb and become some kind of weird hybrid of himself and the Wraith. Issue 4 ends with Scarlet and company pulling out some older military vehicles that don't have the networked technology that can be hacked so they can join the fray. Issue 5 begins with most everyone now taking on Karza, Windblade realizing that the language Karza is speaking is ancient Cybertronian. Dumb question, but how did Mayhem communicate with Karza when we've established none of these people on Earth can normally talk to them? Does Mayhem know ancient Cybertronian? Was that a thing he got from Blitzwing? Prime finally gets everyone to concentrate on Karza as the real threat, responsible for igniting the Or-13. G.I. Joe arrives with more reinforcements, which is in turn added to as Cup and Action Man join in too, finally uniting all the properties together on the same page. Unfortunately, that page is also, the Or-13 is going to explode soon, so we should probably do something about that. Fortunately, our heroes are on it. The Micronauts can interchange the crystals back to their universe, but they need the space bridge to be reprogrammed for that. Rom can handle the reprogramming because of how he controlled it earlier, but the crystals are already destabilized, thanks to vibration, so they need a counter frequency to stop their decay. But the crystal's frequency is changing rapidly, and Soundwave can't alter the frequency while also projecting the energy back to the space bridge. And that's where M.A.S.K and Mainframe of G.I. Joe come in, modifying Matt's M.A.S.K armor to connect with Soundwave and use his own tech to handle the energy projection.
Using multimodal reflection sorting.
Unfortunately, this will also destroy the space bridge, which will strand the Micronauts in this universe, but they say they're okay with that. They'll figure out another way to save their universe that doesn't involve teaming up with Karza.
Vibrational frequency calculated. Operation Revolution.
Title drop! And I admit I don't entirely get it. Is it because they're taking down Karza, who's a Baron? I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid and not seeing the bigger picture with the title. Anyway, they succeed. Autobots City, in the meantime, taking off to make sure it doesn't get hit by the explosion, though Karza is a sore loser, grabbing onto Optimus Prime to try to take him down with him. However, Mayhem sacrifices himself to stop Karza, demanding he be recognized as a hero for his actions. Everything explodes along with Karza, Scarlet helping pull Rom and Matt to safety, while Soundwave kept Mainframe safe, though losing his arms in the process.
Karza is neutralized. Operation Protection.
Soundwave superior.
Optimus admits to Scarlet that they were wrong. Their actions have painted a big target onto Earth, and they need to actually work with humanity as equals if they're to help them with future threats. Meanwhile, the Micronauts are captured by this guy who is eager to vivisect them. I don't know, maybe he was a threat in Micronauts before? I have no idea who this is. And so our comic ends with Scarlet and Matt talking about having a fresh start for both of their forces. G.I. Joe doesn't work for the government anymore, and they were able to recover what was left of the M.A.S.K vehicles to help rebuild. However, they also find a note left for them by Mayhem, who tells them that illusion is the ultimate weapon, and he'll see them soon, implying he'll be back. The world just keeps getting stranger. It's not a bad thing, Matt. It means we'll always have something to do. You say that, but I am eagerly awaiting the day when My Little Pony joins your universe. This comic is good, but it packs a lot in only 5 issues. There are a ton of characters in this, owing to the fact that a lot of these properties are team books, so most individual members don't get a chance to shine. They try to squeeze in a few bits of characterization here or there for some of the minor ones, but it's mostly focused around a few distinct individuals for the larger teams. Matt for M.A.S.K, Scarlet for G.I. Joe, etc. A bit of an exception is made for the Transformers, who all get a lot of story meat to eat up and be distinctive characters. Despite Prime being the main focus, since he's the main good guy for the Autobots, it's Soundwave who does the heavy lifting of doing cool and useful stuff, which might upset people who aren't as big a fan of him as me, and may have hoped for Optimus to get more focus. Rom's part in this is great, showing him being flawed, but understandable in his approaches, while still being his normal awesome Rom self. Action Man is the one who's shortchanged the most among the various franchises involved here, only really being present in the first and final issues. And that's okay. He's not really that essential to the crossover itself, especially when we've already got so much else going on. And that's really kind of the main critique of the book. It's a lot. It's very easy to lose track of who's allied with who, the motivations of each of the villains, that kind of thing. It's probably even worse for people not familiar with any of the individual franchises. Baron Karza as the final boss doesn't really have a lot of impact if you're not familiar with Micronaut stuff, and having so many villains can be a bit chaotic and odd. There's probably stuff that should have been in the main book and not just a tie-in, like Action Man rescuing Cup, but it's not really that necessary. You can follow most of what's going on without reading the tie-ins. It's very competently put together and shorter than a lot of Marvel or DC crossovers, while still being very exciting and very action-packed. If you're a fan of any of these properties, I'd recommend it. Next time, we take a look at another sort of crossover. Kind of a legendary one at that, as we look at Superman versus Muhammad Ali. So, is Blitzwing still strung up in G.I. Joe headquarters? Or did Action Man save him too? Hello my friends, please be sure to like this video, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with others. And if you get a chance, maybe check out my Patreon.